At 10 p.m. on August 6, 1944, a tense quiet hung over the village of Mortain, France. Inside a cramped command post, General Hans Eberbach, commander of Panzer Group West, studied maps with a mix of determination and unease. Tomorrow, he would launch one of the boldest German armored counterattacks since the Allies landed in Normandy. The mission was clear, almost deceptively simple: push west through Mortain, cut off the Americans at Avranches, and crush Patton's Third Army. Success would restore the front. Failure would be catastrophic. Eberbach knew the stakes. He had led panzer units through Poland, France, and Russia. He understood how tanks, infantry, and artillery must move together like a single living organism. But experience told him something few others would dare admit. The attack was doomed the moment it started. Adolf Hitler himself demanded daylight movement. No waiting for darkness. No cautious approach. Clear skies meant Allied air power would be waiting. Eberbach's protests were ignored. At 7 a.m., August 7th, the first Panther tanks rumbled westward through the narrow streets of Mortain. The morning sun reflected off their polished armor, engines growling like beasts awakened. Soldiers clung to the sides of trucks, rifles ready, boots crunching against cobblestones. For a brief moment, it seemed the plan might succeed. The lead units of the 2nd Panzer Division had already pushed 8 kilometers beyond Mortain, American defenses faltering. But then the sky erupted. From high above, British Hawker Typhoons dove like steel-hungry birds of prey. Squadron leader Baldwin had spotted the German column from 3,000 meters, counting tanks and trucks stretched along the road. In minutes, rockets screamed from the sky. Explosions ripped through metal. Fireball after fireball throwing soldiers off balance, flipping trucks, and throwing engines into ruin. The ground shook. Smoke filled the valley. Tanks veered off-road. Infantry scattered into hedgerows. The disciplined advance collapsing into chaos. Eberbach watched helplessly as reports poured in for minutes of concentrated attack, and the Germans were already immobilized. He checked the weather, still clear, still unforgiving. Over the next hour, more aircraft swarmed the battlefield. Forward air controllers embedded with American infantry fed coordinates directly to the RAF. Rockets rained down with surgical precision. Each strike wasn't just destruction, it was paralysis. Tanks couldn't move, fuel trucks were burning, ammunition supplies destroyed. Every attempt to regroup was met with another wave from above. By late morning, the German advance had stalled completely. Units radioed requests to withdraw, citing devastating losses, but Hitler's orders were explicit: push forward. Tanks remained exposed on roads as 83 Typhoons, then 216 more, struck with relentless fury. Explosions erupted in waves, thick black smoke curling toward the clear sky. German crews tried camouflage, tried hedgerows for cover, tried every tactic they knew. Nothing worked. The battlefield became a maze of burning vehicles and shattered soldiers, where every movement risked death. Within hours, the numbers were staggering. By early afternoon, Panzer Group West had lost nearly 2/3 of its armored strength. Dozens of tanks were destroyed, engines disabled, tracks torn off, crews dead or fleeing. Hundreds of trucks, half-tracks, fuel tankers, and ammunition carriers lay in ruins. Eberbach's once mighty force was now a collection of immobile, isolated units. The planned counterattack, a single coordinated thrust, had disintegrated into fragments. And yet, amid the chaos, the human cost, the fear, and the despair, soldiers still fought. Tank commanders barked orders. Infantrymen returned fire from behind shattered walls. Crews attempted to repair what they could. Courage hadn't vanished. Skill hadn't disappeared. But on the battlefield, none of that mattered. They were up against a system, an industrial and operational machine that replaced losses faster than the Germans could inflict them. The RAF 2nd Tactical Air Force maintained near constant presence over Mortain. Forward airfields, mere kilometers from the front, allowed Typhoons to strike, return, rearm, and launch again with almost impossible efficiency. German aircraft were scattered across France, far from the fighting. Their response times measured in hours, not minutes. The sky belonged entirely to the Allies. Every German advance under the blazing sun was doomed before it even began. By 3:23 p.m., the largest single attack of the day hit the 116th Panzer Division. Rockets and bombs tore through a 2-kilometer stretch of road. Explosions threw tanks onto their sides, ignited fuel, and shredded vehicles. The German column stopped. Completely. They never advanced another meter that day. 185 tanks had gone in at dawn. By sunset, barely 62 remained operational. General Eberbach understood the truth in those 12 hours. Courage, skill, and planning could not overcome what the Allies had created, an unstoppable combination of air power, intelligence, and production. The German counterattack at Mortain failed not because of cowardice, not because of bad tactics, but because the system behind the attack was already broken. Factories, airfields, and aircraft had decided the outcome before a single shot was fired. As the sun climbed higher on August 7th, the battlefield around Mortain became a tableau of chaos. Smoke spiraled into the clear blue sky, punctuated by the deafening roar of exploding engines and the staccato rattle of machine guns. German tank crews clambered over twisted metal, trying to salvage anything that could move. Infantrymen crawled through shattered hedgerows, rifles in hand, eyes scanning for targets. Each soldier knew the danger wasn't just the Americans. They were contending with the sky itself. From 35 kilometers away, Typhoons launched again and again, their engines screaming as they streaked toward the front. Rockets fired in deadly arcs, dropping with terrifying precision. A single strike could disable an engine, tear off a track, or turn a fuel truck into a fireball that engulfed nearby tanks. Soldiers on the ground quickly learned the grim rule: stay still, hide in the wreckage, or risk instant destruction. By mid-morning, entire panzer formations were paralyzed, scattered into small pockets, unable to communicate or coordinate. At Panzer Group West headquarters, Eberbach's officers reported the grim toll: tanks destroyed, vehicles ablaze, infantry pinned down. Orders to advance were ignored in practice. The column had fractured into dozens of isolated groups, each struggling to survive. Eberbach's hands tightened around the map. He had studied every terrain feature, every possible route, every tactical maneuver, and none of it mattered now. He had 185 tanks at dawn. By midday, the operational count had dropped dramatically. Meanwhile, forward air controllers embedded with the American 30th Infantry Division relayed precise coordinates to RAF control centers. Captain James Crawford, perched atop Hill 314, watched through binoculars as German tanks attempted desperate maneuvers. Each movement drew immediate retaliation from the Typhoons above. Rockets streaked through the sky, engines exploded, and crews scrambled for cover. The battlefield had become a deadly game of cat and mouse, but the cats were everywhere, faster, and seemingly infinite. By early afternoon, Eberbach faced the impossible. The 2nd Panzer Division, once the spearhead of the attack, reported 40% losses and no ability to continue. Requests to consolidate positions were denied. Hitler's orders were explicit: push forward, reach Avranches by nightfall. But the German command had no idea the scale of the Allied air network they were up against. Each Typhoon sortie was a cog in a machine designed for total domination of the battlefield. Squadrons took off, fired rockets, strafed targets, returned to base, rearmed, and struck again, all within an hour. It was relentless, industrialized precision. Across the front, German soldiers did everything they could. They tried to hide in hedgerows, camouflage their tanks with foliage, and disperse to avoid being easy targets. But the more they moved, the more visible they became to pilots above. The explosions, smoke, and dust betrayed their every attempt at concealment. By 3:23 p.m., the largest coordinated airstrike of the day hit a 2-kilometer stretch where the 116th Panzer Division had regrouped. Hundreds of rockets and tons of bombs transformed the road into a burning corridor of destruction. Soldiers dug for cover. Tanks were overturned. Fuel trucks erupted, and the ground seemed to shake with the fury of relentless aerial assault. The operational paralysis was total. No German unit moved another meter that day. By the time night fell, Operation Luttich had achieved less than a third of its objective. Casualties and destruction told a story that could be measured in numbers, but the real devastation was human. Fear, exhaustion, and shock swept through the ranks. Tank crews and infantry who had trained together for years were now scattered, separated, and vulnerable. Supplies destroyed, radios broken, routes blocked. The very machinery of war had turned against them. Eberbach knew it before the reports even arrived. This wasn't a defeat that could be reversed with courage or tactics. It was a result of systemic imbalance, one rooted in industrial capacity. The Allies didn't just outfight the Germans. They outproduced them, outmaneuvered them, and replaced losses faster than Germany could sustain. By the numbers, RAF Typhoons flew 294 sorties that day, fired nearly 3,000 rockets, and dropped 73 tons of bombs. Every German tank destroyed meant 34 days to replace. Every Allied aircraft lost could be back in the fight within 11 days. The math was devastating. Even the bravest German soldiers understood the truth. They fought with skill, precision, and courage, but against an opponent who could strike with near-constant aerial dominance. Those qualities became tragically irrelevant. By 6 p.m., Eberbach received the order he had dreaded all day: suspend the offensive, consolidate positions, prepare to defend what little remained. The counterattack was over. In just 12 hours, 185 tanks had been reduced to 62 operational. Thousands of vehicles lay in ruins. Soldiers who had begun the day full of determination were now exhausted, scattered, and demoralized. The Mortain counterattack revealed a sobering reality. World War II was being decided not on individual heroism, but in factories, airfields, and logistical networks. Germany's industrial power, impressive on paper, was spread thin across 3 fronts. Allied production and deployment created a lethal imbalance that couldn't be overcome on the battlefield alone. Courage and skill mattered, but only as long as they could be supported. And in Normandy, that support had been utterly destroyed. As night fell over Mortain, the remaining German units dug in where they could. Smoke and fire still rose from the battlefield, silhouetted against the fading light. Eberbach surveyed what was left of his once proud armored force. The day had begun with high hopes, meticulous planning, and the confidence of experienced commanders. It ended with a sobering realization. The battle was lost, not because of poor leadership or cowardice, but because the Allies had built a system capable of replacing losses faster than Germany could inflict them. The night after Mortain was quiet, but the silence was deceptive. Fires smoldered across the battlefield, casting an eerie orange glow on twisted tanks and shattered trucks. German soldiers huddled in foxholes. Exhaustion etched into every line of their faces. Some whispered prayers. Others cursed the orders that had brought them here. Each man knew the truth. The fight was over before it had really begun. The machinery of war, airfields, factories, aircraft, had already decided the outcome. In the days that followed, the full scope of the disaster became clear. Panzer Group West, what remained of it, was trapped in what would become the Falaise Pocket. Alongside 7 German armies, nearly 100,000 soldiers found themselves encircled in a 40-kilometer-long, 15-kilometer-wide trap. Tanks, trucks, and half-tracks jammed the roads, a testament to both the scale of German planning and the limits of human endurance. Above them, 2,800 Allied aircraft flew near constant sorties, turning every movement into a potential death sentence. From dawn to dusk, Typhoons, P-47 Thunderbolts, and P-51 Mustangs strafe-bombed and rocketed the trapped German forces. Thousands of vehicles were destroyed, soldiers killed or captured, and yet some managed to flee. By August 21st, the Falaise Pocket had closed. German losses were catastrophic. Approximately 10,000 killed, 50,000 captured, and countless more scattered or stranded. The tanks and trucks that had been the pride of Panzer Group West were gone, melted into Normandy countryside by explosions, fire, and relentless air assault. Eberbach survived, escaping the encirclement, but the war he had believed he could influence slipped further from his grasp. On August 31st, British forces captured him near Amiens. His command, his pride, and his tanks were gone. The Mortain counterattack was over, but its lessons endured. Courage and skill had been irrelevant that day. What mattered was industrial power, operational coordination, and the ability to strike first and strike constantly. The Allies had mastered all 3. The Germans had not. In the post-war years, Eberbach reflected on Mortain in his memoirs. He wrote, "We lost a battle in 7 hours, but the war had already been lost in the factories. We just didn't know it yet." His words captured the harsh truth of modern warfare. Tanks, artillery, and infantry were vital, but without air superiority, logistics, and the capacity to replace losses, even the most disciplined and brave soldiers could be ground to dust. Mortain was not just a defeat, it was a revelation. It showed that World War II was increasingly a war of systems, of production, of industrial endurance. Germany could field elite units, deploy clever tactics, and train the finest crews, but the Allies could outproduce, outfly, and outlast them. The sky over Normandy on August 7, 1944, was not just a battlefield. It was a demonstration of the strategic advantage of combined industrial and operational might. By sunset on that day, the German armored counterattack had been reduced to a shadow of its morning strength. 175 tanks lost in just 7 hours, hundreds of vehicles destroyed, and countless men either dead or retreating under fire. The battle crystallized a truth that would shape the remainder of the war. Modern combat was no longer decided solely on bravery, but by the ability to sustain, replace, and coordinate forces with ruthless efficiency. Mortain proved this beyond doubt. Eberbach returned to civilian life after his release in 1948, living until 1992. Yet for the rest of his life, the memory of Mortain remained vivid. The roar of engines, the flash of rockets, the cries of men, the realization that no amount of courage could overcome a system designed to crush him. Mortain was a lesson in war, industry, and human limits. A battlefield where the true victor was not the soldier on the ground, but the industrial and operational power controlling the sky above. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Share your thoughts in the comments.